I'm happy to have a conversation now with Dex Hunter-Torricke, and he worked for Google DeepMind. He was the global comms lead there for quite some time, and he took a decision to actually leave the private sector and also join the public side a couple of months ago. And we have him coming in through a call, so here he is. And welcome to Berlin, Dexter. How are you?
Yeah, I'm great. Great to see you.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining. And we know we would have loved to have you here in person. Of course, it would have been much better. But hearing that you spent time in Iceland, we all are very envious because there it's probably truly cold and hot at the same time. Is it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty freezing here.
But I hope you're on holiday. You're not working, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic. So, Dexter, you've been yourself a son of a refugee, you told me, and you've worked with like the highest level in tech. We're talking about people like Zuckerberg. You've been involved with Elon Musk. So maybe you give us a little insight how your personal journey has shaped your view on technology's role in building let's say, a more inclusive, a more fairer society, because we could argue you've seen it all and you've been very close to those people that are actually now shaping probably a part of humanity's future.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I spent 17 years working with a lot of different leaders from the public and private sector, and with a whole bunch of the tech leaders who are obviously household names, have built many of the companies and services that all of us use and billions of people around the world. And for me, that was a fascinating portrait and journey just through how the world works today, or in many cases doesn't work. It's a sad fact of the moment we're in now that when people hear that I used to work for Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg, I often feel compelled to immediately explain from the beginning, there's a reason why I don't work for those guys anymore. I have a very different set of values.
I think everybody in the room here asked this question, yes. So.
Absolutely, right? I mean, you meet somebody who's done that, you think, oh, what are you going to encounter next? But look, this is my story. I was born in the UK. My dad was a refugee from Burma. During the Second World War, he grew up in a refugee camp in India. My mom was an immigrant from Malaysia. She came to the UK in the 1970s to be a nurse in the British National Health Service. And life was really hard growing up. We had no money, we were outsiders. And it was because of that background that from a very early age, there were two things that really defined me. One was I had an obsession with understanding systems. And the real system that I wanted to understand was, why is it that some people have amazing, thriving, prosperous lives? They have all sorts of opportunities. And for lots of other people, including, myself and my family, life was really hard. And the other thing that defined me was I always thought of myself very unironically as a citizen of the world. And normally when you hear the phrase citizen of the world, it is something that sounds very aspirational and sentimental. It's the sort of thing we would use in speeches at the UN, and it's sort of a fluffy, thing. But for me, it never was a fluffy thing. Kids would come up to me on the playground at school in the 90s, and they'd say, "Do you speak Chinese or Japanese?" And I think, I don't know. I was born in Hammersmith. Why would I do that? I feel I'm British and European. Why do we have to have these absurd labels that try to other us? And so, all my life, I was interested in trying to understand the systems that make how the world works, and to make them better and to serve more people, to make life better for the largest number of people in the world, and to get rid of those pointless divisions. And that's what took me eventually to the UN, where I started my career. I did speech writing for Ban Ki-moon when he was the UN Secretary General. And then that's what took me to the tech industry for 15 years. And I worked for Zuckerberg and for Elon Musk, and then Google DeepMind. I was at Google twice in my career. And I have remained completely focused throughout my life on how do we improve those systems and make them truly serve humanity.
So, but then last October you decided to take a different step, right? So you said you leave big tech and you announced that you're focused now on a new chapter where everybody would be saying, what the hell has happened to you? You're joining public service. So we had this on stage before, by the way. So you're the second today that is going that direction. And you said that you would like to prepare societies for a radically new future. So tell us, what is your view on like the coming decades for us? What breakthroughs, are we expecting in our lives?
So one of the many dysfunctions and failures of elites and institutions and the systems that we all depend upon now in our societies is a bunch of people have the inability to process that there are many different things happening all at the same time. So often when you have conversations about the future, people jump to just what is going to happen technologically. And there's a story, right? You've probably heard this one a million times, where AI is getting more advanced all the time, and it's going to unlock all these extraordinary capabilities, which might cure diseases and make us vastly more productive, sweep away a bunch of our problems, and we end up in some sort of, more utopian society. And sure, the technology might do extraordinary things. No one's ever accused me of being anti-tech in my life. I believe in the power of technology to be a motor of society, a motor of human progress. But the future isn't just the future of technology. The future is everything in it. And one of, the big, absurdities that, we've managed to convince ourselves of in the tech industry, and it certainly was the dominant, narrative the whole time, I was in big tech, was technology changes the world, but they would always leave out the other half of that. The world changes technology. Tech doesn't just show up in a vacuum. It arrives in the world as it is, with all of our dysfunctions and problems as they exist now. And that is how you have to understand what the future really looks like. It's the future of everything. It's not just the future of technology. Consider this. If AI and an increasingly powerful set of technologies roll out across our societies over the coming years, but we have done absolutely nothing to prepare our economies or our workers for that world, how do we deal with the world that might be here within the next decade, where the vast majority of workers are no longer competitive with machines, where a very small percentage of humanity has astonishing rewards from building those technologies, and things which mean that inequality just goes through the roof? Would we consider that a good world if the vast majority of rewards from that new age belong to 0.1% of the population? What happens when we consider that the largest military rearmament in history is underway right now? And of course, in Germany, this is something that is a huge part, right, of the political agenda and the societal imperatives right now, given what is happening in Ukraine. What happens when increasingly advanced intelligence also combines with a whole new generation of weaponry? How does that change the nature of war and potentially lead to much more vicious conflicts which undermine international law and the entire international order that all of us grew up in and that I expect most of us believe in if you care about peace and human rights? And then, isn't it amazing that we can have a conversation all about climate change, and this is something that took place at COP, and yet the connection between AI and climate change is so poorly articulated, either by the tech industry or by folks who really do want to do the right thing and protect Earth's natural systems. Between 2019 and 2023, the world consumed and exploited almost as much natural resources as the 60 years before that. We have an insatiable appetite as a human race for new resources. And every conventional narrative about the value, the promise of AI is that it might turbocharge our economic growth. That is literally why governments all over the world are desperate to get access to the infrastructure, the systems of the AI boom. If we are all going to consume resources even faster with even more rapacious appetites, what does that mean for a whole set of Earth's natural systems which are already in full retreat? We could easily end up in a world in the second half of this century where we face truly cataclysmic conditions and the breakdown of societies all across the global south. And of course, in Germany, as in the UK and a whole bunch of other countries, we are facing the consequences of a global refugee crisis. There are 123 million refugees and displaced people in the world today. And the reason why that is because fundamentally, a whole bunch of countries collapsed in the last 20 years. Most governments have failed to deal with the root causes of that. They have simply tried new ways to set up borders and barriers, mechanical means to stop the boats, or whatever the slogan is. But if there's a world coming in which many societies might face collapse because of the combination of war and climate change, their economies becoming no longer competitive against, for example, the United States and China, having economies turbocharged by future AI systems, then you could be looking at far more than 123 million refugees. You could be looking at billions. And in that context, how likely is it that we hang on to the way of life and the values that we all care about? So this is a whole set of perfectly plausible scenarios, that we need to begin to take seriously. If that is something that is absolutely within the realms of possibility in a very short term, we have to act now. We have to really begin to think, how do we prepare for that so we avert that bad future and get to something where we truly are using technology to serve humanity and all the values and things that I expect most of us want?
That was a long answer, but I think a very good one. Thank you, Dex. That was the talk itself. We talk about this later. We talk about education today as well. So if you've seen a lot, and from your perspectives, what are the biggest changes that we will see in education, shaped by AI, and how can we prepare? What do you see coming here?
Well, I think AI can absolutely give us all sorts of extraordinary capabilities. It can help us to learn, to process information in new ways, to extend the frontiers of knowledge. AI also, because it is changing the world, as much as the world is changing it, we will all need to begin to think, how can we change the nature of how we are thinking and using those technologies, not just expecting the tech will come in and solve a bunch of problems for us. The biggest challenge I think that a lot of leaders are facing now, and what all of us are facing as individuals, is we need to be operating in a much more multidimensional way. In the industrial economy, that world that I was born into, I grew up in, certainly the one that most of us have lived our lives in, your value was based on becoming a specialist. You became an expert in a narrow niche of subjects, and you went deep on that, and that was how you accrued value. And we are living in a time of complexity now. This is a world of complexity, and that means the nature of the challenges are all interconnected. They're all unfolding faster than ever. And the leaders, the people who will be most relevant and effective in navigating that future, have the ability to operate very quickly and seamlessly across problems and domains which involve lots of different challenges, lots of different bodies of knowledge. And so in terms of education, that is a vastly different, approach that is needed than what we often have, where we really try to funnel people into smaller and smaller, deeper buckets of knowledge. We will need to find new ways as well to bring in the teaching of the skills to give people access to the experience, so that from day one entering the workforce or moving into different, domains and professions, they will be able to add value from day one. Because, of course, AI, just as an information processor, essentially, it's really, really good at knowing things which might be objectively true. And if you are a human whose value is mostly based on just knowing a bunch of stuff which might be objectively true, I suspect you're going to have a really, really bad time in about a decade.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the new technologies and the positive side. So where do you see positive impact happening through AI, for example, in education? Because we always have two sides, and I think we just had a speaker here pointing out, the other side, the critical side, the skepticism we should have, the big question we should ask before advancing in that speed. So where do you see real positive impact when it comes to AI in education? Where can AI make a difference for us?
Absolutely. Look, there are so many ways. A lot of the challenges of existing education systems fundamentally come down to, can students, can people who are learning get access to enough attention from educators? Can they get access to a set of support and resources that really work for them as individuals. We are all fitting into systems, and the systems, don't always meet all of our needs individually. And that was always the promise of personalized learning. Personalized learning is something that, is obviously not a new concept, but with AI, we now have much more powerful capabilities, which allow us to scale that offering and really deliver something that is sophisticated, designed for the needs of each person individually. And so you obviously have new tools coming out all the time now. South Korea just passed a major funding bill in the last few months, assigning over $700 million to put AI powered textbooks in every school, because that's the way they view the future of education. It is bringing those tools in and transforming systems. But honestly, there are just infinite sets of tools which might begin to add value in different ways. In the OECD, we know that the number one reason why teachers quit the profession is because they get burnt out from excessive administrative overloads. It's all the time that teachers spend, marking homework and lesson planning, all the things that take them out of doing what makes teachers want to be teachers, which is spending time in the classroom with kids. And if we can dislodge some of that administrative burden, use AI to take that load off teachers, that could have all sorts of beneficial effects. So I do see all sorts of amazing promise as well.
And as well, as we enter the classroom here, where's the space for human skills? Maybe this is something where teachers can really play a role, like empathy, creativity, and values, because this is what machines obviously cannot replicate, right? They can't. Maybe this is a role for teachers. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, look, I think my overall thesis on how we manage this future that's coming, right, is technology can be extraordinarily useful. It will do all sorts of things that will be life-changing. But at the same time, many of the things we need to respond to an age of technological change are just deeply human. They're very analog. They're timeless things in a way. We have, obviously, for example, a massive crisis with disinformation in our societies now. And for, more than 15 years now, decision makers and policymakers have been wringing their hands saying, how do we fix this? And there must be some sort of algorithmic fix to this. What is it that the tech companies can be doing? And there are a bunch of things they can be doing, and which they often aren't doing. But the real solution doesn't lie in a set of technological solutions to technological problems. They are, in fact, societal solutions to societal problems. Why is it you have, millions of people in societies who are angry and poorly equipped to, deal with critical thinking and facts? The set of solutions will not lie in the hands of a small set of creators, on the US West Coast. It is something that relies upon building a thriving, healthy society at all levels. And so teaching empathy and kindness and what it means to be a citizen and the values of what it means to be, a healthy, informed citizenry, all of that is something that we need just as much, if not more, than just access to raw technology.
Thank you. I have one question, Dexter. We just talked about the last speaker as well. How can we, as society as a whole, as a global community, act right now? And so I'm asking myself about what kind of leadership do we need? What is the leadership that we need, like across tech, across education, society, getting policymakers, and we need leadership here and to navigate this, right, responsibly. What kind of leadership do you see, and what do you recommend a country like Germany? What actions can we take from here?
Leaders have to lead. You are trying to take people on a journey to somewhere different. And if you want to be a leader, you've got to have a vision of where that destination is. And it's extraordinary to me that we have so many leaders who don't seem to have any vision of where that is. If anything, their vision is just to take the world back to 2016 or 2007, whatever, they consider the last great moment in the past where they think things were generally working well. And of course, we're not going to be able to do any of those things. And those moments weren't even that good. That was just a moment. There is a vastly better future on offer. That future I talked about, where we face economic disruption and the devastation of our climate, the collapse of our global order, everything that is unfolding now, that is just one future. But what if we chose a very different path. And we said that is what we are trying to aim for. It's not something that's realistic because guess what? The realistic path is the one heading for decline right now. We all feel that. I think very few smart people who pay attention to the world, who have a conscience now, are not thinking something is extraordinarily wrong with the world. We all feel that dread. But if we can say there is something else we want to create, we want to build an economy powered by the next generation of technologies that will unleash abundance for our societies. We want to build a world order that we're not always 5 minutes away from fighting one last world war, which will be our last. We do not want to destroy our climate, simply to achieve economic growth. These are all things that can then begin to galvanize agendas at every level across society, and we will know what we're aiming for. When we have that vision, it truly can transform societies. And so, if nothing else, this is the bare minimum. I think if you're a serious leader, if you want to be a serious part of the future that is coming, a good future, you've got to say, that is what I want to build. It's not just optimizing things. It's not a technocratic vision of how we can just incrementally improve these things. It is the destination that we are all trying to set off for.
Thank you, Dexter. And I'm happy that you are now in your new role. And I'm sure you're working on that vision that we jointly need. And I think we're all in the room very happy having heard from you. And hopefully we hear more from you in the future. Thank you so much. So a big applause to Iceland.
Thank you.
Enjoy your holidays and speak soon. Thank you very much, Dexter. Thank you.
Have a great rest of the day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.